Hope Cook with Dermcast TV. Today I have Kasey D'Amato. Welcome, Kasey.
Hi, Hope.
I'm a fangirl, believe it or not. I've watched your webinars and noticed your post for a long time. Kasey is an expert in contract negotiation, salary negotiation. She's an entrepreneur, she's a businesswoman, and also a PA.
That's all very true.
So I'm excited about talking to you because so many of us get confused when we see a contract in front of us or when we're in front of our boss or HR and they're throwing these things at us. We don't know what to do.
Yes.
So what do you think one of the first things we should do when we have a contract given to us?
That's a great question. It's something that we've gotten asked over the years many times because sometimes a contract can be a handshake, sometimes it can be 32 pages.
Yeah.
And you never know what you're going to find in there. So, one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they're focused only on the salary and they're not thinking about the exit clauses in the contract. And that can really make people stuck or trapped and can sometimes be even more important than the salary part of the contract.
Yeah, so talk about that. What should we look for?
So some of the things that we recommend people look for is the term notice. So is it 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? And hopefully you can give notice within the contract term. So the contract might be 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years, but you can provide notice if something isn't working with 30 or 60, 90 days within that contract term. And that's something that a lot of PAs don't realize. They think that they have to stay in that job until the end of the contract term. And in some contracts, there's actually a penalty that if you leave before the contract term, you can owe money back. So you want to look out for those type of clauses in contracts because the contract term is designed to renegotiate salary or benefits, things like that. But if you want to leave or make a change, that should be acceptable at any point with appropriate professional amount of notice.
Yeah, so what about contracts that say we'll renew automatically? Is that a thing is that a red flag?
Not necessarily a red flag. Automatic renewals can work in some instances, especially for a very experienced PA. There might not be a lot that's changing in those instances. Might be the collections are the same and the PA is really at the max of what the practice can afford to pay from a business standpoint. That's what we teach PAs how to negotiate from a business standpoint, not from a comparison standpoint or from salary reports, but from a business standpoint. So if they automatically renew for an experienced PA, it might be okay, but always pay attention to when that renewal date is because that is your opportunity, should you want to negotiate, would be at that renewal time frame. So usually we'll say it will automatically renew if you do not negotiate at that point in time.
Yeah. And I think what trips us up when we're handed a contract, we don't want to be seen as problematic or I'm going to cause trouble because I want to be able to quit this job with 30 days notice.
Yes.
So how do you handle that?
Yes, that's a really important point because when attorneys review contracts, they will what we call redline almost every single item. So then the PA is going in with this big long laundry list and then that can be perceived as problematic to the employer. We've actually seen PAs lose opportunities, job opportunities because they were perceived as too demanding.
Yeah.
So what we advise is understanding each term and then choosing what we call your deal breakers.
Okay.
The top maybe 3 to 5 that really you cannot live with these terms. Maybe it's salary, maybe it's the non-compete radius, maybe it is the penalty if there's a penalty upon leaving. Pick the big ones. Or maybe it's restrictions to outside activities. That's a really hot topic that we talk to PAs about a lot. And some of the other ones, you want to be aware of what they are, and maybe they're not perfect, but if everything else about that job is perfect, then pick your top 3 to 5 deal breakers and negotiate on those. Understand the other ones, be like, they're not ideal, they're not perfect, but I can live with them. I'm okay with it. I'll address those at my next renegotiation.
That makes sense. Do you recommend seeing a lawyer or seeing someone like you before you sign anything, just to give you an idea of here are the red flags?
If you're not comfortable, we definitely recommend having someone else with experience take a look.
Yeah.
So, contracts are legally binding. So we are not attorneys at Certified PA Consulting, so we always let everybody know that. However, we do have the most experience in the industry with common terms. Most attorneys are experts with labor laws in their states, but they're not very familiar with PA contract terms. So speaking to someone like us at Certified PA Consulting or another experienced PA who has a lot of experience with terms of contracts to understand what they mean, and if you feel like you need an attorney to review from a legal standpoint, that would be your follow-up step. The attorneys love getting notes from us because they don't know what is industry standard for non-competes. They don't know what tail coverage, if that's industry standard or not. So it's very difficult to negotiate if you don't have a sense of the entire industry landscape, and also if you don't have an understanding about the business model, because it can vary widely from a small private practice to private equity to hospital or academic center. The way you're going to negotiate in each individual business model is going to be quite different. True. And the attorneys won't understand that either. So it's good to have, unless you're very comfortable in yourself negotiating, but if not, it's good to have an advisor by your side helping guide you, because the strategy is quite different depending on the type of business, medical business that you're negotiating with.
I bet you get a lot of frantic phone calls like, I have the contract, what do I do?
Yes, excited and frantic at the same time, because it is exciting, and we always congratulate everybody right away, and then we sit down calmly and say, let's break this down, let's talk about what your long-term goals are with your career, for your lifestyle, and then let's sit down and look at what this opportunity is. Are they in alignment? Let's look at the business model, and let's make sure it's sort of like a marriage, really. Is everybody in alignment here? What you want for your career, the procedures, the independence, the financial opportunities, and is this particular opportunity going to allow you to get there? Maybe, maybe not. There's lots of other opportunities out there.
Yeah, so let's talk about non-competes.
Yes.
I know you get asked about that all the time.
Yes.
If your employer says, sorry, I just can't change that.
The non-compete.
Do you have any wiggle room?
You mean with the mileage radius?
Or the number of years, if they're just not willing to budge.
Yes. So non-competes are a really interesting topic, and there's a lot of hot press right now about the laws and if they're going to be enforceable or not enforceable. Right now, as of today, we're telling people to still take them serious. What we advise and what we consider industry standard is a non-compete radius that is the equivalent of 30 minutes commute. So that's going to be quite different in Manhattan compared to Omaha, Nebraska.
Right.
So whatever the equivalent is of a 30-minute drive is pretty appropriate for non-compete, because the non-compete is not designed to hold you prisoner at a practice. It's designed to not impact the practice's business should you leave.
Right.
And most patients won't drive really much more than 30, 40 minutes. So that's really industry standard. If you are moving or you're changing practices and it's outside of a 30-minute commute in your area, that's pretty appropriate. The other important factor is to make sure that it only applies to one location.
Yes.
Because there's so much consolidation now. We have seen some contracts that limit from every location. In a private equity group, it could be 100 in the entire state.
And then you have to move out of state.
And then you have to move.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then what about the number of years? Is 1 year appropriate?
We advise 1 year. If you can get to 1 year, that's ideal. At 1 year, again, the point of the non-compete is not to impact the business, the bottom line of the practice. So after 1 year, patients will have found another provider in that practice. They will have settled in. If you came back and work across the street, it's probably unlikely that the old patients are going to find you that will impact the bottom line of the business. That's the liability risk. That's what people don't realize. If you violate the non-compete, what you would be liable for is if patients leave the practice to follow you, what will be calculated by the attorneys is the value, the revenue impact to the business, and that's what you will be potentially sued over.
Wow. And you would be ordered to cease and desist practicing while all that is going on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What about salaries? So I know that I'm on a lot of these chat groups and people always say, is this a good salary? And they just throw out one number.
Yes.
And they don't tell anything else.
Yes.
How many patients are you going to be expected to see? So what are some questions that you ask clients?
I speak on this, multiple times a year at multiple conferences, because the salary range for dermatology is so vast. It can be, $100,000 to as high as $400,000. So what is fair or what is appropriate or what is reasonable? There's so many variables, have to do with patient volume, procedures, payer type, is it Medicaid or private insurance? Is it Mohs? Is it cosmetic? What are you doing? What's your patient volume per day? What's your benefit package and your other costs to the practice or dedicated staff? Is it the type of practice that has a lot of staff, there's a lot of overhead?
Yeah.
That will impact salaries a little bit, but it helps you be more efficient. So it works out. It doesn't mean that you're going to make less money. In fact, you probably can make more money if there's more staff. So it's a very complicated formula that we teach people, but overall, as a general rule, your salary and bonus, your compensation part without the benefits and staff, typically for a healthy business model, is going to fall somewhere around 25 to 35%, just the compensation portion without the benefits and without dedicated staff. Once you add those things in, a healthy business model can afford up to 40%. But if you're thinking just the income alone, about 25 to 35% of collections. So that's the way to determine what is applicable in that big, wide range.
What do you think is reasonable for somebody who's new to dermatology, like a training period? Do you usually say count on 3 months at least, 6 months before you start earning any kind of bonus?
Yes. So we always recommend a training period. It's going to be a little bit less salary, and there's probably not going to be a bonus. That's because you're not seeing patients. You're not quite ready yet, but you'll get there. So it can be 3 months, 6 months, or up to a year, depending on the type of practice.
Okay.
And if the supervising physicians want to train more than that, it depends on the type of procedures. In a lot of cases, the PA will train and then they'll start with non-procedure patients and then they'll ease their way in every 90 days to a little bit more responsibility, a little more complex patients, complex procedures, and then by the end of 1 year, they're sort of up and running and can negotiate a productivity structure or bonus structure at that time.
Okay, and they should put that in their contract, like I would like to meet every 90 days or every...
Yes. Yeah. So that the training period, time period should be identified in the contract.
Oh, that's good.
So 100%. So no matter what it is in that particular practice, we've seen it as short as 30, we've seen it as short as no training, which is not ideal. But whatever it is, 30, 60, 90, 180, or even a year, it should be outlined and delineated in the contract. So it's very clear, this is the training, compensation, and then it will adjust. And the adjusted compensation should be outlined in the contract as well.
Okay. Now, let's say you've been at a job for a while and you want to go in and talk to your HR, talk to your boss about a raise.
Yes.
So should you surprise them or should you, do you want them to have a heads up so that they know you're coming? How do you tell PAs to do this?
Yes, well, it's surprising. People don't really like to be surprised on that topic, so maybe don't surprise. But, an annual review and this is another topic that comes up all the time. The employer is not always going to come to the PA with an annual review. So what we recommend is for PAs to approach the employer or the manager and just say, hey, I'd like to talk about how I've been doing. Is there anything that you would like me to do or I could do better in my role? Always make it an offer to them before you make the ask.
Yes.
That's critical because if they see that you're a team player and you want to understand their needs, what they want for the practice as a whole, then they will be much more likely to agree when you say, hey, I'm looking for something. Do you think we could adjust my compensation package? I'm just looking for something that's a little more incentivizing for the long term.
Oh, I love that.
That's the way we recommend phrasing that.
Yes, tweetable phrase.
Yes.
Love that. Okay, so what about other tips? Body language or, I've watched the power posing TED Talk. So any other tips that we can use?
Yes. So I love the power pose before the conversation so that you don't feel intimidated or scared. However, when you're in the conversation, when you're in the negotiations, you want to make it a dialogue. Just like we're having a conversation now, like we're all in this practice, we're all here to grow together. How can we make this a win-win for everybody? And again, always present the value to the other party first, what they want. That's critical because if you go in making an ask or saying what you want, what you think is fair, it will put them on the defensive.
Yeah, using the word fair seems to do that.
Yes, it will put them on the defensive because what's fair for them as the employer is quite different than what's fair for us as the employee. So we don't recommend using the word fair. We recommend having a dialogue like, hey, I just want to touch base. It's been 6 months or a year since we chatted. Like, how do you feel I've been doing? Is there anything I could do better? I'm thinking about maybe taking on some more leadership in the practice. Is that something that would be of value to you?
Yes.
Or
I like how you're asking a lot of questions.
Always ask questions. And then when they start reacting and leading in and being like, oh my gosh, that would be so helpful, that's great. As soon as they say that, then that's your opportunity to negotiate for something in addition. Now, that being said, if your collections have been increasing over time, you can negotiate just off your collections increasing and show your productivity from a revenue standpoint. But if you've reached that point where your revenue and your collections are kind of at the max, we all get to that point.
You can't see any more patients.
You can't see anymore. And NPs and MDs, we all hit this plateau when we hit a level of experience, and that's when this other strategy is critical. What else can you do in addition to patient volume? Because that's not going to be the answer at that point. If you're already at that 25 to 35% compensation package, and then your cost to practice is at 40%, there isn't much more room to negotiate unless there's some new project that you can bring some new value, whether it's management, whether it's research studies, whether it's PDT, whether it's starting cosmetics in a practice that's all medical, whatever it might be, some new value. That's where your opportunity is going to be once you have a certain level of experience. And if it's not in the practice, that's when we help people start side hustles and speak for pharma and do all sorts of things so that you can continue to feel that progress, because we all will hit a cap and plateau in medicine. It's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, you're right. If you get stagnant and you're like, I can't grow in this practice, but you can still pull in outside things to help you.
That's when you start doing the outside activities. Yes, that's why that restriction on outside activities is so important. People don't think so at the beginning of their career, but it's critical at that 7 to 10 year mark. You do not want those restrictions on the outside activities.
All right, and then what if your employer will not share your numbers?
Yeah, that's not ideal. It's a more industry standard to have your numbers. Now, if you really cannot get your numbers, you can do napkin math. You can look online at the Medicare reimbursements. It's public.
Yeah.
So you can look and you can at least get a rough idea. We recommend monitoring 2 weeks of patient activity.
Okay.
And your most common procedures and the number of procedures in those 2 weeks. Look at the Medicare reimbursements, and that gives you a rough guide. You can do some napkin math, and you can get an estimation of what your collection potential would be.
No, that's helpful.
Yes.
How did you get into this? How did you go from dermatology PA to getting into the business aspect of it?
Yeah, I was fortunate. My very first job coming out of PA school was in Santa Monica, California, and my practice owner was very business savvy and a great educator. And early in my practice, about 5 years into clinical practice, I got involved with practice administration, and he started teaching me cash flow, how it worked, why we would make decisions to make major purchases for lasers, how we would recoup the investment, how and when we would make decisions to hire or fire providers or support staff, and how that impacted the cash flow. And when I started learning all of that, that's what triggered my interest in business, and I've gone on to start other businesses, many other businesses, and now I help entrepreneurs all over the world in all industries start and grow businesses.
That is so cool. I love how you got started. So any closing words for PAs who are like, I have no clue when it comes to business and negotiating?
Yes, I would say don't be afraid of the numbers. Don't be afraid of the process or intimidated. A lot of people feel the underdog as a PA, and I and myself and my team at Certified PA Consulting, we're all about empowerment, as is SDPA. PAs can do anything. PAs can negotiate, PAs can be top paid, PAs can be paid more than physicians in many cases. And so we are really about empowering PAs to not be afraid of the negotiation process, not be afraid to learn a little bit about business, not be afraid to talk about money, not be afraid to look at their personal finances and build their personal wealth at the same time, because then they'll feel more financially free to make smart decisions with their careers. And we're here as a resource, as is, I know, the SDPA. We're a big supporter, and we have been for 20 years and will always be.
Kasey, thank you for sharing all this information with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. It was fun.
Hope Cook signing off with Dermcast TV.